If you couldn't tell by my undying admiration for the Oculus Trip series, I love clunky AA games with lots of potential, as well as what can only be described as anime schlock. So ramming these two together in a blender along with my enjoyment of shooty games sounds like an extremely interesting cocktail. The only problem is that Japan doesn't seem to have a lot of traditional shooters, while we in the West have a whole stack of them the size of Texas. And for the most part, even when this kind of gameplay is implemented, it's more of a smaller mechanic in a larger series. And more often than not, it's hyper-realistic, which I'm totally fine with. By now, you know that I love the Resident Evil series, Metal Gear, and tons of others. But obviously, if you've seen the title, then you know I don't care about that shit today. Nah, we out here looking for anime shooters. I'm trying to do some kawaii drive-bys, boy. X Troopers was released on November 22nd of 2012 and is a spin-off of the Lost Planet franchise, a series of realistic, post-apocalyptic third-person shooters that have always seemed cool. I've just never gotten around to actually sitting down and playing through it. According to developer-publisher Capcom, those pee-pee-poo-poo games are focused on action shooting and cinematic shooting, while our buddy X Troopers is focused far more on exhilarating manga-esque action. End quote. Which is, all in all, a pretty fair description. The first thing you notice when booting up the game is the obvious manga aesthetic that sets this game apart from anything else in this video. I mean, the cutscenes are almost worth the price of admission alone. The only other games I've seen pull something like this off well is Ultimate Spider-Man or 13. But while those emulated Western comics, X Troopers is undeniably manga. Those beautiful screen tones, speed lines, bright colors, interesting visual storytelling, basically, shit's really cool. The soundtrack is also amazing. Some tracks are so good that they feel like they should be their own work entirely. It meshes J-pop and electronic in a way that just somehow screams early 2010s racing game, and I fuck with that hardcore. The audio and the visuals come together to encapsulate this game with a certain vibe and style. There's absolutely no way I can hide how enjoyable and exciting this game is to play. Like, usually I like to pretend like I understand half the shit that I say up here, but this game just bring out the 10-year-old in me that just wants to say, game good, give me more. It's a third-person shooter along with some mecha levels thrown in there, but I personally prefer the former. It pretty much relies on auto-aim, and the game can often be restrictive, leaving certain mechanics like jumping as solely context sensitive, but the game gives you more than enough to kill aliens while keeping it fun. It has a nearly identical control layout to its parent series, just with a few slight additions. You get 2 weapons, a melee attack, and the new jetpack, which I messed around with a lot more than I thought I would. The AI friends are actually a pretty big help in battle. You can't customize their loadouts, but you can switch their costumes like you can with Bren. Yes, the main character is named Bren. Bren Turner. I need this game to be localized so fucking bad. This game just gets me, man. It's like 2012 Capcom knew that I love to buy alternate costumes and level up social rank shit and just made a game out of it. This game feels like a cartoon on a Saturday morning or a weekly manga you can keep returning to, and that's the best way I can explain it. X Troopers is just an all-around enjoyable game with tight controls and a beautiful aesthetic to top it all off. The only drawback being that it's obviously still in Japanese. This game has quite the dedicated fan base. There's even some who are going through the arduous process of fan translating the game to English. Sadly, it's safe to say that this just isn't going to reach your standard degenerate anime fan, who would probably eat this up like it was insert random anime girl's thighs. So I obviously love this game. Its music, gameplay, cel-shaded graphics, fun voice acting, and unique style all come together to make it not only one of my favorite games of the 7th generation, but my favorite of all time. At least for now. However, it, like most great games from the land of the rising sun, will never be shown to a larger worldwide audience, nor will it get a sequel. Speaking of which, Love Destroy is a PlayStation 1 exclusive, published by Sony themselves as well as developed by Inti Creates. But more important to me than that shit is that the character designs were created by Masakazu Katsura, known for his work on the legendary manga series Eyes. This manga is basically fucking perfect. Read it. now. His art has a certain beautiful perfection to it while maintaining that ideal anime aesthetic that I adore. And as you can tell by the FMVs, it translates really fucking well to a video game. As I implied earlier, this is another one of them Japanese exclusives, so the story isn't something I can really hone in on, which really sucks since the aforementioned FMV cutscenes were animated by Production IG, who are known for a lot of things, to say the least. And they do a fantastic job of conveying the narrative to me in a very concise way through visual storytelling, along with a bit of TNA, because what do you expect at this point? Yes, this is yet another big mecha anime game. The only difference is that you're in the mech 100% of the time in this one. It controls surprisingly well for a 5th gen shooter, since it uses both analogs and the DualShock to provide a pretty modern control layout before said layout became the industry standard. That sentence was a fucking mess, but I'm not rewriting it. While it controls really well, the game can often feel like it's moving way too fast for these slow-ass mechs, and the camera can often feel disorienting, especially when jumping. But it looks fantastic. Despite being made during the awkward era of developers getting used to the third dimension, Inti Creates made the world seem like it popped right out of an anime. And what helps is the intense attention to detail. The citizens roaming the streets, the intricate building models, the painted lines on the street, the natural train track layout, the power lines. All of the shit gets demolished whenever you get within a centimeter of it, so it's surprising to see just how much work was really put into the maps. But aside from destroying shit as a mecha, there's the love simulation stuff. Yeah, that title is extremely on the nose, since each of the 3 girls, known as Q-trons, has a respective ending you can get by mostly just completing their levels. I personally went after the redhead tsundere since I have no fucking taste. It seems like there's a bit more to getting the ending, like you get a bad cutscene if you didn't achieve the best relationship with the girl during the mission, and then there's this heart select shit, which I assume is to choose a dialogue option, but I can't understand any of that shit. The soundtrack absolutely blew me away. It has a sense of sadness while also being calming at the same time. If it was up to me, I'd personally just turn off the sound effects and the voices and just listen to the music the entire time. That's honestly how good it really is. The game itself is only about 50 minutes long. The only gripe I can really throw at it is the insane difficulty spike during the final mission. It throws 3 insanely difficult enemies at you at the beginning, and after those, there's still an additional final boss just to see the ending. Fuck this, I'm watching it online. Apparently the game outright flopped in Japan financially and didn't do much better critically. As a matter of fact, it did so poorly that Sony just restructured their entire game development process, which is most likely why there was never an English release or even a cult following online. But I don't know. Although the final mission is a bit much, I still love this game. Even if this game is eventually translated years down the line and it turns out that the story is complete fucking dog water, I'll still say that holistically, Love and Destroy is still a pretty damn good time.
Just you and me. Extra buzz. はあ、綺麗やん。ようできてるようできてる。お、え、今の何？Extra buzz.
To you, that must have felt like 2 seconds, but for me, it's been, oh, would you look at that, a week and a half. Ear infections are no fucking joke. In my video on Dimension Tripper Top Nep, I briefly mentioned the Senran Kagura series, a franchise that's almost like Neptunia, just a lot more horny. Much like the fighting game series Dead or Alive has the Extreme spin-offs, which are basically just scantily clad minigame collections, the mostly hack and slash series got its own scantily clad third-person shooter spin-off. 2017's Peach Beach Splash is all about a tournament centered around water guns, because of course it is. And when girls are hit, a part of their bikini comes off, because of course it does. If you've played the series before, or just generally a degenerate just like me, then there's nothing new here. In fact, there's nothing here whatsoever beyond the original idea. Honestly, this game is pretty fucking shallow, often boiling down to deathmatch with NPCs. I mean, it's fun, And it's probably got the most functional shooting mechanics out of any of the games I've talked about today, which really isn't a big bar to live up to. The character customization is extensive to say the least. Each character stats are upgraded through these cards which you obtain at the end of each mission, and cosmetics can be bought with coins that are also earned through completing missions. Everything in the game can be unlocked without having to spend additional money, which is the ideal way to keep players coming back. Except that all of the interesting cosmetic stuff is exclusively paid DLC. And I hate it. A lot. So if you really want to unlock everything, it could cost almost as much as the fucking game. I just can't wrap my head around the idea of releasing a $60 game with tons of unlockable content, only to panhandle me for a fucking t-shirt. On a lighter note, there's an intimacy mode where you can spray the girls with water and then fondle them. I hope nobody I know is watching this. To be fair, I guess, this is all just to kiss whichever girl you pick, which in and of itself is pretty wholesome, if that's what you want to call it. They even made an entire game based around it on Switch and PC, so there must be some kind of market for this. Not saying that this can't be seen as creepy or uncomfortable if you aren't the target audience, but at the same time, you're like not the target audience, so why knock it for appeasing the fans who do like this? It's abundantly clear that this game and its massive amounts of fan service was made for the fans of the series who know each individual character and their respective lore. What little story there is mostly boils down to friends love each other and shit, which is fine. I'm not coming here for story, I'm coming for coming. I'll stop. This game is fun, pretty, and has some nice mechanics like the upgrade system using the cards. Not to mention that it's horny as all fuck, but you're probably playing it for that very reason. TLDR, Anime Booba.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer? Every night.
For some, the game that they waited to be translated was Seiken Densetsu 3, Racing Lagoon, Clannad, Tokimeki Memorial, but for me, it was X-Troopers and Gun Pixies, a weird Vita exclusive that for many years was stuck on the Vita in the land of the rising sun. I imported both of them at the same time, and while I liked Gun Pixies, unlike X-Troopers, without the ability to understand the story and what the fuck was going on, I felt a bit incomplete. Not to mention that the original game had fall damage, aka you fall, you die. It didn't help that the controls were a bit uncomfortable and that the jumps were way too finicky. Honestly, that, on top of not being able to understand jack shit, is what held me off from enjoying my Vita copy. Thankfully, in 2019, the game was translated and ported to Switch and PC, along with a few minor tweaks. The most important one to this fucking weirdo being the removal of fall damage, which allows me to explore freely without the overlooming fear of starting the mission all over again. Despite the updates, this game still breathes AA energy with its needlessly precise jumps, obtuse camera, constant reuse of levels, and so on and so forth. But of course, there's something interesting about it, to me. The setup is all about these two aliens who come down to Earth to observe this dorm full of college students, but it very quickly evolves into a formula familiar to anime fans, basically becoming a slice of life centered all around these college girls. Each one has their own little problem that needs to be dealt with, like starving themselves to lose weight, overeating to earn money, and depression due to feeling like everyone around you hates you. But to offset that sadness, we have the comedic relief, Misa, aka you. She's unemployed, plays games all the time, and even makes perverted remarks about her sister.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
The story's fine if you're into that genre, but if you have no interest whatsoever, then these cutscenes will bore the ever-living fuck out of you. Hell, I like that shit, and even I wanted to turn it off due to how long these scenes can drag on for no damn reason. The gameplay itself, outside of the aforementioned iffy jumping, is mostly about running and shooting stuff with the occasional investigation segment. Much like the rest of the game, it's fine in an adorably clunky way. But don't fret, hentai fans, because most levels end with shooting the dorm members with happy bullets that send them into euphoria.
My dad's dead.
I meant the fun kind. It's kind of similar to Demolition Girl, just more realistic. If a tiny alien girl shooting a college student with bullets while avoiding a violent race of octopus fits that criteria for you. The thing I like the most about this game is, oddly enough, the level design. Each level I've played through has managed to balance the functionality of a platformer alongside the aesthetic of a room. Obviously it's low res as fuck, this is a Vita title after all, but they all look and feel lived in. And it makes for a pretty unique game. It's probably the one I'd recommend the least out of this entire video, since the story is fine, just overly long, and the gameplay is fine, just a bit too stiff. But I honestly really liked it solely for the fact that it was unapologetically Gun Pixies. And that goes for the rest of the games on this list. Obviously, original doesn't equal good and cliché doesn't equal bad. However, whether you liked these games or not, it's obvious that they tried something new, or, at the very least, made an interesting game. Interesting enough to make an entire YouTube video out of it, which lasted an entire ear infection. Whenever I'm working on big, overwhelming projects like I am right now, I like to come up with a fun side project so I don't pull a Thelma and Louise. And finally, making this video after thinking about it for 2 entire years is the decompression I've needed. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'll catch you guys next time. Later, kids. Have a good night.
しかしいつしかそれは人々の心から消え去りおとぎ話のように語られるだけの存在となってしまっただが今も忍びはこの世界の裏側で必要とされ存在し続けている